Hello everyone. My name is Abdul Rahman, and I'm doing this video to go over the report that was released by UNICEF. And it's, as you can see, the state of the world's children in 2024 and the future of childhood. I'm doing this video because it's just so hard for me to go through these documents on my own. Yet it's so important to learn about these things, especially as an educator and a researcher in the field of neuroscience and education. So if you're here, you're probably working in at least an education or humanitarian. So welcome. I'm just gonna go over it. I haven't read it previously. Gonna share my thoughts, gonna share my opinions, and we can just talk. This is a very chill video. So I'm gonna start. The document is 75 pages. So probably there's gonna be multiple videos. And so the forward is from Catherine Russell, who is the executive director of the UNICEF. I first heard of Catherine Russell when the war or the genocide in Gaza started, and I started like being more interested in the people behind UNICEF and the United Nations. So Catherine Russell. They are revisiting the first edition of this report that was released in 1980. And it's basically from James Grant. So that's James Grant. And did he win the Nobel Prize? Oh, that's probably a plaza. All right. So he said that an important part of UNICEF's task is to monitor the trends which affect the world's children, to extrapolate those trends into a picture of the future, to examine them in order to determine what kind of changes in the present might improve the future, and to allocate its resources to the points of maximum leverage in bringing those changes about. Monitor the trends which affect the world's children. I have some opinions on that. The trends, unfortunately, have been continuously the same since the 1980s, which is alarming. When we say trends, what do we mean by trends? So trends, I believe, poverty, uh, bad water, basically malnutrition and diseases, the spread of diseases and wars. But let's see what ChatGPT has to say. Yeah, so exactly. So the environment, the conflicts, social trends like child labor and child marriage. And even this year, there was something that happened in Iraq with child marriage. Um, that is threatening the women and girls' rights in Iraq. So it's to amend its personal status law, allowing girls as young as 9 to get married. It's 2025, people. 2025. And they are doing laws like this. So this is alarming that the same trends that the UNICEF has been tasked to monitor have been the same since the 1980s, which is alarming. Let's actually, did the trends change since 1980 to 2025? That, yeah. So there's positive changes, child mortality decline, which is good, vaccination coverage, education access, poverty reduction, and digital advancement. However, climate change, like and displacement, I mean, people, come on. Um, mental health issues, which is also something to navigate. It's an entire field on its own, but mental health issues have been growing concern. Um, and that digital divide, which is extremely important. This digital divide is extremely important. But I have a question here. Would you say that the positive is being more significant than the negative. So the advancement and is the advancement in trends more, I'm trying to frame this question. Is the advancement in trends better, more than the negative challenges, which outweigh the other? So obviously it's not going to give me as straightforward action, but child mortality has dropped. There was in 1980, there was 12 million under five that died each year. Today it's under 5 million. More children are in school and a higher global literacy, which is also good. Progress. All right, so this is a good. In many areas, progress has outpaced negative trends. More children survive and more children receive an education and escape poverty than in 1980. But climate change, conflict, and mental health pose massive threats that could reverse some gains if not addressed urgently. I get that. I get that. And it makes sense. I mean, so, and I think this is a disclaimer I want to put here if you're gonna continue watching this video. I don't trust ChatGPT wholeheartedly. It's just because I know that's trained on a lot of data, so I'm gonna think about what it says. However, it's not because there we need to see data, we need to see resources, we need to see reports, we need to see statistics. It's not enough to just take this, but this is because it's not the goal of this video is to do this, is to go through the report. All right. To extrapolate those trends into a picture of the future, to re-examine them in order to determine what kind of changes in the present might improve the future, and to allocate its resources to the points of maximum leverage in bringing those changes about. Okay. Obviously, they continue to monitor the trends. And one thing that's interesting about this report is that so the first report that started in 1980 had a theme from 1980 to 2000. So the theme of this one, the 2024 version, is from here to 2050, which is very interesting. And the year 2050 will be very different. So there will be high income countries. Children will account for a little small share of the population. As we move further into the 21st century, the future of childhood will increasingly be in Africa. So by 2100, there will be more children on the African continent than anywhere in the world. That's so interesting. By 2100, there will be more children on the African continent than anywhere else in the world. Something to think about. And are you ready for this world? Africa has made important gains in recent decades, but major issues persist, particularly the learning crisis. If Africa does not do more to develop the skills and enormous potential of its children and young people, it risks squandering the possibility of the demographic. Right. So I think here they're trying to say that technology and AI right now, they have to be integrated within the African context. And it's not being done yet because, and even I've spoken to a couple of teachers from Africa last month, and there's a digital divide. Like, so at Neurocam Lab, we do these like digital learning experiences, but it's not possible in Africa. So I had to develop like offline resources to teach children neuroscience. If you're a teacher, I can like email me and we'll talk about these things. But the digital divide crisis is extremely alarming. And I can't just not think about how there are so many children in Africa that are currently struggling, specifically when we think about just take one piece of Africa, which is the Congo, right? So uh, the Congo children and mining crisis. Yeah, that's an NPR. So it's just like going like smartphones and computer and electric vehicles that they are what are shaping the modern world. But because of that, we are basically laboring slave-like conditions in the Congo. I don't want to go in this video and in this in any specific crisis. I just want to mention because I really want to go through the entire report and hopefully a couple of videos. But I advise you to learn about these things, to learn about these issues, um, to learn about how uh, was the media not even reporting on these things like from 2021 and it's been ongoing. So I honestly I can link resources in the description of this video, but we have to learn about the crisis that's happening in the Congo, how these children they are going through this. So this has to be resolved, right? We have to find solutions for this because this is not you say that you want to have a like the world in 2050 2100. These images should not exist. This should not exist, and we can't just get normalized, right? We can't just get normalized saying these children going like this, and just because they're Black kids and African kids, then we don't have any emotional response. Or in the genocide of Gaza, just because they are Palestinian kids, then it's fine to for them to go through this. Um, no, and in any other country. So we have to learn about these issues. Going back to Africa, I'm really concerned how we want like more teachers and to advance technology and include AI, but it's extremely important to eliminate the bigger issues, and especially like children who are mining cobalt for the West. They are not thinking about education or school or neuroscience or biology, and that's fucked up. Right. Um, let's see what. So the challenges facing children and their communities will not be confined to a single continent. Overcoming problems is challenging. By another thing, which is the climate and environmental crisis, right? So that's also another thing. So we have a child labor crisis. We have an which is connected to the education crisis, which is connected to the conflicts, which are also connected to the climate and environment crisis. And this highlights a very important point that no issue exists on its own. There's no issue that exists on its own. They're all interconnected, right? And I love how one of the activists, major environmental activist, Greta Thunberg, actually highlighted this. She's a Swedish activist, and she's been extremely vocal about Palestine because and I think I've heard this quote from her. She said that you can't be an environmental activist and be silent on bombs being dropped on a community. Um, Tons and tons of bombs. So no problem exists on its own. The education crisis, the environment crisis, the water crisis, all of these crises, they are interconnected, right? And as someone in the education field, and education being something I really hope that children get to experience, but I also understand that if they don't have access to water, like clean water and food, then it's kind of difficult for them to concentrate in classrooms if the classrooms are there. So just something to think about. There will be 20,000 children a day worldwide that are displaced by floods and storms exacerbated by climate change. These numbers will grow as climate change obviously is getting worse and will directly affect children's health and development. Now, the world already knows what it needs to do to limit the worst impacts of climate change. Youth leaders are urging national leaders to stick to their climate commitments. To ignore those calls is to betray the future of children and young people. And I don't understand how many politicians just don't understand that. You know, like even Donald Trump, and like he, I haven't actually looked into what did he do when he became office regarding the environment. I just even there's a report by Nature magazine. Nature magazine is a big magazine in the scientific community, and there's a study that was published um that spoke about something called microplastics, and microplastics are basically these microplastics that infiltrated the brain, right? And it's extremely alarming because one important thing is that they didn't really provide things to do because there's not like they don't know what to do. So it's very alarming. It's actually just released a few days ago. So and again, I don't want to go into any other thing. I just want to try to stay consistent, but sometimes my brain goes to these ideas, and I hope I'm bringing awareness to these issues to you. But the climate issue, the environmental issue is extremely important, specifically water, right? Water crisis is extremely crucial. I think I've heard about a statistic that really troubled me, and I believe it was yes. So Sudan has a water scarcity crisis like many other African countries, but there's a specific thing where, so according to World Vision, apparently there are millions and millions of people who don't have access to water, you know? That's 1 in 10 to clean water, right? So that's 1 in 10 people on the planet. And more than 1,000 children under 5 die every day from diseases related to water. So the water crisis is extremely important. Let's go back to the report. So the world is different from today, and it also risks being more of the same. We continue to live in a world where children's lives are being devastated by war, conflict, and violence. Exactly. And this is and I believe, like, so they gave the example of the Congo, of Gaza, of Haiti, of Lebanon, of Myanmar, of Sudan, of Ukraine, and others, right? And they do these because these were probably the headlines of 2024. Like they made it to the headlines. There are so many other countries and territories around the world that do not make it to the headlines, and this is concerning, right? But I've added examples from the Congo, from Gaza, and from Sudan, and Haiti, Lebanon, Myanmar, Ukraine. So many issues happening, especially in honestly in all of them, right? It's my bias that made me say especially. I wanted to say especially in Lebanon, but it's my bias because I'm from there. But it's It's all of them. Suffering is suffering, right? All children suffer the same. And the list is long. And we live in a world where too many children have poverty, discrimination, gender-based and sexual violence. And you know what's more fucked up? And this is a report I've heard on a panel of a doctor from Gaza, that there are humanitarian workers who go to these war conflicted areas and sexually abuse the children there. So many articles like this one, this one. I'm not gonna go to more articles, but that's just messed up. The magnitude of problems in the world, the magnitude of problems, the layers of problems, because even the people that the people in war areas see as their peacekeepers, humanitarian aids, light, are doing this, just messed up. It's just messed up. Sick, sick. مرض. حياة الله مرض. Anyways, these multiple assaults on the well-being, security, and dreams of children fly in the face of commitments made in the conventions on the right of the children adopted 35 years ago. Let's actually see a briefing on that. Don't you just hate when ChatGPT does that? Come on. But anyways, let's see response one. Oh, actually, this one, response two, is more summarized. So there's none, all children have the same rights. Welfare of the children is the top priority. Every children has the right to live, grow, and thrive. Children have the right to express their views and have them respected. And this convention was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1989 and adopted by 196 countries. So it's right to education, healthcare, adequate living standards, protection from abuse, neglect, exploitation, and harmful practices, freedom of expression, thought, and association, right to a name, nationality, and identity. Well, I mean, I just want to say that it's kind of difficult to find a child who doesn't who has all these rights included, especially in the Middle East, in Africa, um, in Asian countries. It's nice on paper, I guess. Those promises fall short. I agree. Let's understand the mega trends that are transforming our world. So we cannot know for certain what the future holds, but we examine the forces and trends shaping the world. So they are also looking from the year since the pandemic. There were a collision of political, social, and economic trends has fueled a global polycrisis made up of intensifying challenges of democracy, fragmentation in the multilateral system, and a debt crisis, which is an unsustainable and a recipe for social unrest, according to Antonio Guterres, who is also a person that I've got to learn about more since the genocide in Gaza. Important commitments on many of these issues were made at the UN summit in September 2024. Okay, let's see. So one mega trend is the climate environmental crisis, which we talked about. And it's a complex mix of crises involving climate change, pollution, biodiversity, loss that are already reshaping our world. And where's the first mega trend? Oh, so it's demographic. So there's a demographic transition where the number of children by 2050, the world will be home to about as many children as it is today, 2.3 billion. In some societies, children will account for fewer than 1 in 10 members of population, raising questions about their visibility and respect for their views and rights. So it really depends on the demographic. I was actually talking to my friend. He's in Korea, and he's like, "I have two kids. I'm a millionaire," because of like they see just two children, and he's not like an actual millionaire, but because he has two kids, so the community there, they view him as someone with lots of kids. But in places like maybe in Lebanon, that's an average, like you have like an average number of kids, right? Maybe in other countries, it's in Africa, um, or other countries in the Middle East, maybe it's very low. So demographic, I agree on that. Talking more about the climate and environmental crises, more children are at risk of chronic respiratory problems like asthma or cardiovascular diseases, and they will be living in places at greater risk of exposure to droughts, cyclones, and floods, where a lack of safe water and food could become the new normal. Lack of safe water and food could become the new normal in 2050. Final mega trend is frontier technology, which we talked about, but it does raise digital divide crises. But let's see what they say here. They say that AI and neurotechnology, which is very interesting that they're tapping into neurotechnology. As someone from neuroscience, I will wait till we reach that section of the report to talk about neurotechnology. But AI and the newer technology are changing education and healthcare. And this is so true, specifically in education and healthcare, right? With AI, like having a private tutor or like an AI tutor, or access with a little of internet, you can have access to an entire human being in a different country to provide you with resources, which is something we've been experiencing for a very long time. But as the hopefully technology being more and more easier, this could be easier for a lot of people. I mean, the process of you just entering YouTube and watching me may not be as accessible to some other person right now. And healthcare, obviously, because with AI, the development of AI, but also uh yeah, with AI and big data, we can have a huge improvement in healthcare. And this is not only in for like children, like this is for worldwide, like this is worldwide. It's not only for countries or areas facing difficult situations. Green technologies to limit the worst impacts of climate change and support the transition to a low carbon, more sustainable future. Vaccine and medical breakthroughs could save millions more children's lives, but the visions of technology upsides can only be realized with the right incentives, governance, and accountability mechanisms in place. Otherwise, we can expect missed opportunities or negative impacts. This is a youth voice, and they're saying that children have the right to express their views, including on matters that affect them. Of course, that's what we have to encourage our children. We have to encourage them to be open, to be vocal about their emotions, about their mental health, about what they are feeling, especially boys and girls. Um, but boys, because they are, especially in many cultures, boys are treated like, oh, you have to man up, you have to be strong. But no, children are children. Um, the world's children in 2050. So drawing on the demographic change, drawing on the environmental change, drawing on technology and many other indicators, which we will talk about. And we have to learn about this. We have to learn about like what is the okay. Let ChatGPT explain it to us. So SSPs, they describe different global developmental pathways without climate policies, used alongside representative concentration pathways to assess climate impacts, explore how socioeconomic factors influence emissions and the climate resilience. And we have 5 SSP scenarios: sustainability, green growth, middle of the road, fragmentation, which are countries that prioritize national interests and have weak global cooperation, inequality, the divided world, and the fossil fuel. So these are 5 scenarios. And these pathways or scenarios help project future climate risks and inform global policy decisions. Okay, okay. And they are not predictions, but an exploration of possibilities based on different assumptions about the future. They reflect a certain level of variability in areas like economic growth and demographic trends, among others. What they cannot reflect are the unknowns, such as possible pandemics, economic shocks, and technological game changers. In other words, the world is unpredictable. After all, who in March 2019 could have predicted that within a year, children around the world would be locked out of school because of COVID? Makes sense. So each possible future reflects a world that is very different from today. And a business as usual scenario based on current trend lines. So based on current trends and a business as usual, so forget about pandemics and stuff, children will live in societies with fewer children and more adults. And I do understand where this trend is coming from. Again, taking the example of my Korean friend. So this mindset could emerge from Korea or Japan or China and probably just dominate the world. So we will have fewer children and more adults. More of the world's children will live in Africa. More will live in cities, and more will go to school. Many are projected to live in communities that are at lower risk of prolonged subnational conflict and that have made some progress toward achieving gender equality. This sounds good. However, children of 2050 will live in places that are far more exposed to climate risks. The numbers in the business as usual are stark. About 8 times as many children are projected to live in countries at high risk of exposure to extreme heat waves in the 2050s compared with the number of children exposed at the start of the century. The consequences for children's health and well-being and for the stability and resilience of their communities are profound. So other scenarios are even more worrying. There are potential futures where, based on the decisions made today, the share of children completing primary schooling is lower. Wait, the share of children completing primary is lower, where barely 1 in 2 children complete secondary. More children live in poorly resourced settings than do today, and where the risk of exposure to be is projected to be 13.5 times higher. But they said that there will be more schooling, like more will go to school. And now they are saying that there are other potential futures where children will less complete primary schooling. I believe this is because of its a potential future, which makes sense. But I wonder which future is more statistically logical. I hope it's the first one, but I don't think they have mentioned this yet. And these visions must give us a pause, but they should not fill us with despair. For there are other much more optimistic scenarios for how the future could unfold. We don't just need projections to tell us this. We can take lessons from history. Consider the progress of this past half century alone. Under 5 mortality, so it's the death of children under 5, it dropped 60% in the past 30 years. And malnutrition has decreased 45%. And despite the setbacks of the pandemic, rising vaccination coverage has saved countless lives. an estimated 31 million lives through measles immunizations alone. And as we near the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, we look to the next 25 years and ask ourselves, how can we secure a future for children in which they survive, thrive, and meet their full potential, which is the goal, the life, As part of my studies, as part of what I study in neuroscience, we understand the power of childhood, and childhood leads to better adolescence and adulthood. And all children have the right, you know, to thrive and to live. Um, our guide for building the best future must be the Conventions on the Right of Children, which was adopted 35 years ago. The CRC has supported the betterment of countless children's lives around the world. It's just so hard to see that these conventions really made an impact. Like, I think they did support lives of many children's, not enough. So many children should have been saved and should be with us right now. But I don't know. It's kind of, I have mixed feelings with conventions and uh because usually it's conventions are just a bunch of people meeting to discuss very straightforward things. I mean, you shouldn't do a convention to say that every child deserves the right to express themselves or to live or to have a name. But I guess it's because the world is darker than we think. Okay. Non-discrimination, the duty to serve the needs and to provide opportunities to every child. And I just want to highlight something because I might get hate on that. I know that they highlighted way more things than a name, and it's important to sit down and discuss. And I mean, I'm doing it right now. I'm discussing this report with you, but it's just that, like, when these powerful people they gather in these conventions, we need to see an actual implementation and an application of what you are doing. And 35 years ago, I wasn't here. I don't know how children were treated, but I'm here now, and I know children are not treated the way they should be treated. So let's continue. So the intention to serve the best interest of the child represents a litmus test for decisions taken by legislature, courts of law. The right to life, survival, and development emphasizes the need to support every facet of a child's growth, including the physical and mental health and their social and cultural situation. And the principle to foreground the views of children reflects the importance of ensuring children's voices are heard and taking seriously in matters that affect them. Okay. I'm gonna finish the introduction and I'm gonna dedicate a new video for chapter 1. So let's just go through the last page. Now, as more societies move through the demographic transition, investments in health, education, and skills will be vital to harness the potential demographic dividend. In an increasingly urban world, we also need to focus on developing cities that are more sustainable, resilient, clean, safe, nurturing for children. In addition, in societies where adults increasingly outnumber children, we must find innovative ways to ensure rights and equity across generations. It's just basically what I just said. I'm not gonna go over them again. I'm just going over the three important factors that we talked about, which are the demographic transition, the climate environmental crises, and the frontier technology. So our responsibility that anyone who reads headlines, and I love this because, I mean, if you just read any headline or you follow any news page on your Instagram account, you will know that we are facing a major collective struggle to solve the problems of today. Some might wonder then about the wisdom of trying to take on the challenges of tomorrow, but these are in fact also the challenges of today, and they urgent. Yeah, of course. I mean, if like change starts today, right? If 35 years ago they acted on the problems that were there, and there were so many problems that still exist to this day, as we have seen by the trends, maybe the world or the children wouldn't have suffered, right? So for children to have a good life in 2050, it doesn't mean that in the year 2049 we want to decide that. We have to decide from today to try and work for the betterment of children. So the challenge of 2050, to eliminate the problem of 2050, we have to start now. Thus makes it the problem of 2025. Why should we address these challenges? I will read the answer, but because don't you want a better future for the children of the world? Don't you want the world to be a better place? Don't you want better leaders and more leaders and education and healthcare and just a future where there are no wars and genocides being televised? But let's see what 15-year-old Alexander Pietro, who wasn't yet born when this century started, and as part of a letter writing competition by the unit, it's a very interesting idea, letter writing. As your predecessor, I understand that I have a huge responsibility for your wonderful future. I promise to do everything possible so that you can live in a happy, cloudless world. I love that. I love that. I'm gonna zoom into it because I want to end the video here. But yeah, we should do everything possible so that children could live in a happy, cloudless world. I love that. Just thinking about so many clouds right now. Anyways, thank you for staying. Oh my God, you've been watching this for so long. Thank you for this. Please comment. Like, I'm only making these videos first because I think it's a good way for me to go through these reports, but I also want to talk with people who are interested in these things. So please comment. Let's connect, right? I have Instagram and LinkedIn and all these things. Let's connect, because if we were to make the vision of all children happen, of adolescents like Alexander, we have to work together. So let's do it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the second video where I will go over chapter 1. That's 3 mega trends shaping children's future. And I think we discussed them, but maybe we're gonna go over some interesting details. In the meantime, have a great day, and don't forget to work for a better future for the children.